the streets come alive with rhythm and rhyme. It's Kuma time in Cape Town. We have opened the door for you to explore a million things to see. Cape Town, my beautiful Cape Town. Cape Town, my beautiful Cape Town.
Good evening to people of the Cape. Dis mense van die Kaapse Vlakte kan goed saam met julle. Tonight we're going to speak about the correctional services system in South Africa. And I think you guys would be pleased to know that I have the minister with me in the studio. And we're going to talk about a lot of things that you guys have asked me to speak about, things that do matter, things that you guys are concerned about. So without any further ado, Minister, welcome to Cape Stories.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege for me to speak to you.
Thank you.
And to the people.
Thank you so much, Minister. Minister, just before we start, just a bit about yourself. We always see this guy busy working. Just tell us, are you married? Are you single? Are you leaking?
I am married.
Okay, you are.
I have 3 children and I have 5 grandchildren. So that's a background. Not going to give the names
Okay, no,
for
no, no.
security reasons.
Yes.
I always say my clients are not very friendly people. So yes, I do. I was born in the then Western Transvaal, it's now the Northwest. I have a twin sister.
Okay, we didn't know that.
Yeah, and we were the first twins that were born in the new hospital in the town Vogel.
Oh,
Yes. So that is then about 2.5 years, we moved to a farm just outside Potchefstroom, and that's where I actually grew up.
okay.
So went to farm school, and then I went to Potchefstroom Gymnasium High School in Potchefstroom. I did all my studies. I did first it was a Potchefstroom University for Christian Higher Education, and later it became the Northwest University. I did have a law degree.
Okay.
I also did a postgraduate diploma in communications. I did a master's in public management and development. And then I did my PhD on political studies. So that's more or less my background. I became the mayor of Stilfontein, where I still live, in 1988. And in 1989 I was elected to Parliament. So I then came to Parliament and I'm still in Parliament.
And you have a passion to work for the people, to serve the people.
Yes, this is really a passion to me. Because I say that you have to serve. And if you're a member of Parliament and you do your job well, then you serve the people. You must think about your people. And that's what I'm doing also now as a Minister of Correctional Services. I always say to my people that we must remember that we say we are correctional services. What does the services mean? It means that we have to deliver a service to the people of South Africa. And that service is that we have a responsibility to protect the people of South Africa, the communities, against criminals. They come to our facilities, we go through a process to try to rehabilitate them, because we must always remember, for instance, if someone had received a sentence of 10 years imprisonment, then after 10 years, that person is going back into the community. And we must do our utmost best to ensure that they get rehabilitated, so that if they go back into the community, that they will become good citizens. There are, of course, quite a lot of challenges to obtain that, but we try our best. But having said that, I also say that people mustn't think that the correctional services or centers, the prisons, it's not a hotel. It is, you don't want to be there. So people must just understand that. And in short, I always say as minister, when it comes to the employees, I have 3 principles. Firstly, I see the employees of correctional services as the most important asset of the department. And then the second issue is there must be discipline. And the third issue is there must be consequence management. And that I see as my recipe to try and to see that we get the best services delivered from correctional services to the community.
Minister, we have a bit of issue with prisons all over South Africa. Issue in the sense of it's overcrowded. What can you tell? What are you busy implementing? Because we know you've been minister now for the last almost 2 years. What structures and what are you implementing to clamp down on the number of prisoners within prison? I think we're currently at 140% overcrowded.
Now, we're not 140% overcrowded, but overcrowding is a problem. At this moment, we're about 58% overcrowded. But let me give you perspective on that. At the moment, we have just over 105,000 sentenced prisoners, and we have 107,000 beds. So we have enough bed space for the sentenced prisoners. But then we have about 60,000 remand detainees awaiting trial. And that's where the problem comes in. Now, to address the problem of overcrowding, you have to look at these remand detainees. Because as I've mentioned, there are enough beds for the sentenced prisoners. Now, the remand detainees, we have about 27,000 foreigners who's part of that. When I became the minister, I said that I embarked on a process to see that we can deport the foreigners back to their country of origin. But unfortunately, it must be a process because it requires an amendment to legislation. At present, for instance, the Criminal Procedure Act, the Correctional Services Act determines that the moment a foreigner has been arrested and been sentenced, they must go to correctional services. If they await a trial, then they come to correctional services. So it's 27,000. So we already far in the progress. In fact, I tabled notice in the parliamentary program for this year that we are coming forward with amended bills to address that issue. But even if you amend the bill, you still have to ensure that there are international, can I say, treaties with countries. But the good news is they are willing. For instance, our neighbor countries, they are all willing to let us sit around the table and that they will receive their own citizens back when it comes to deportation. So that's one matter. Then we have about 3,300 remand detainees that couldn't afford a bail of R1,000 and less. So they end up in prison, and that's where, for instance, you have juveniles for shoplifting, minor, can I say, criminality and that sort of things. Okay, crime is crime, but it's minor offences. So they couldn't afford R100 bail, but they're awaiting trial for 3 months, sometimes even longer. And that's when last year with the budget vote, I made a remark to say, maybe we should start a discussion on corporal punishment, but not in general like it was before '94. It must be part of a sentence by a court of law. And you can even give, and I'm sure, if a court of law gives a offender a choice, I'll say 6 of the best, or you go to jail, I think they will prefer the 6 of the best. So that is one way, but I said let's open the debate, and the debate is still continuing. Now I must say that the previous Inspector Judge Cameron, he embarked on, they call it a bail fund. It's a bail fund financed by the private sector, not by taxpayers' money, to see if they can get enough funds to then pay the bail of these, can I say, remand detainees. But to give a perspective on that, it is costing the taxpayer 463 rand per day per inmate. So you can ask yourself, 100 rand bail, but it's costing the taxpayer 463 rand a day.
Okay.
So that's one aspect also to reduce the overcrowding. But then the major problem is that the Justice Department cannot deal with, can I say, the demand on sentencing. We have 6 remand detainees awaiting trial more than 10 years in our facilities. And then about 65% of remand detainees are waiting already more than 5 years for their cases to be completed. So we are in discussions with the Justice Department to see how we can speed up that process.
For instance, just like you said, there's about 27,000 foreigners within our prisons, right? Are these people, are some of them, are most of them, or some of them, are they legally or illegally here? Because that's maybe also a concern. Maybe some of them committed crimes, and it was more worse crimes that you don't know of. Are they legally in the country, or?
It's a mix.
That's a mix, okay.
But the majority is illegally. For instance, we have about 6,500 of these foreigners because of contravention of Home Affairs legislation and everything, that they are illegal here. We are in discussion with Home Affairs to say send them back. But now I know. The first thing people always tell you is to say, yes, you send them back today, and within a week they're back. But I can't say to the people that the Government of National Unity is working on an action plan when it comes to illegal immigrants. Of course, if you're legal, then it's not a problem. So they are working on that. Because it's creating a huge problem in our country. It's not xenophobia or anything, but it puts pressure on our health services, on our water resources, all that. And of course, most important, the fact of employment.
That's right.
So that is, they're working on that.
But this is something very interesting, and I have to congratulate you. Was the matric pass rate in the prison. I think you were just over 90%, which is very well, which is very good for a prison system. It means that people want to change their lives, because you're not going to spend time doing the matric if you want to be a criminal. So how did that go?
It went very well. The passing rate was 94.4%, and the matriculants in correctional services contributed 134 distinctions to the national number of distinguished obtained by matriculants. That is part of our rehabilitation process. And I said just now that rehabilitation is very important because we have that obligation and constitutional obligation to ensure that we, can I say, ensure that if they go back into society, that they are rehabilitated. But we have different, can I say, courses. Matric is one course, but there is also with the TVET colleges, we have agreements where people can study through them. Of course, it's all online. We have people who even obtain degrees, LLB, law degrees, and everything. So it's their choice, and we encourage them to make use of this. But besides that, we also, and when I became the minister, I said I'm going to put focus on self-sufficiency. What is self-sufficiency? That means that if we look at our prisons countrywide, most of them do have agricultural land. And I'm focusing on the fact that the prisoners must produce their own food. So they must work the lands. But then we also, for instance, have workshops, metal workshops, wooden workshops, with clothing. For instance, all the uniforms are manufactured or made by inmates, and everything. All my furniture in my offices were manufactured by inmates, and we have our bakeries. Now, a bakery is a good example of inmates working. It's part of rehabilitation because if you're busy, then you apply your mind with what you are busy. If you are sitting idle, in Afrikaans sê ons, soos sal hulle sê, ledigheid is die duiwelse oor. So that's what we would say. So my policy is that we must focus on that, but we also give them a certificate. And let me use the example of a baker. They get a certificate when they go out there.
Okay.
A certificate to say, I am trained to work in a bakery, and they can, even some of them can start their own bakeries because they now have the knowledge. Now I know unemployment is a huge problem, and we must try to, can I say, empower them to get into the competition
Yes,
when they come back into society.
that's right.
Because they have a drawback. There's a stigma when someone was in prison coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, the employers don't easily want to employ them. But now, if they have the certificate, and then, I mean, I use that as an example, but if you work on the agricultural land, if you can receive a certificate for, you can drive a tractor or whatever the case may be, metal works and all that, you can even get a certificate for that. That is from correctional services side to empower them to get into the race.
Yes.
Because if they don't have it, you can just think yourself, then they don't have a chance. And then the problem and the chances of reoffending is becoming a huge possibility.
That's right. Minister, I remember back in the day, many of the old prisoners back then would go, when they go to prison, they would be hard labor. They would either go work on farms, they would learn how to build, and once they come out of prison, after 10, 15 years, they would be builders. And because working with your hands is something that we have, especially nowadays within our communities, do you have any plans on bringing that back where these guys will go and work on farms? Because the farmers need help. We have a lack of housing. Can't we, like you say, the petty criminals, can't we take them, and let them work on the construction, help build houses, build the arctic houses? I think we have enough manpower. It's just that how are we going to use this young man from prison and allow him to prove himself and also to learn?
But let me say, for instance, we have part of our activities for bricklaying, people who can do bricklaying. And what we are actually referring to, okay, let me just say that if we talk about hard labor, people think that if you work on the agricultural lands and, for instance, producing cabbage or carrots or whatever, that's not hard labor. And the Act complies when we use people for that. But bricklaying, it's true. And we are now also more focusing, we call it community services, where a certain low category of offenders, that they can go out and, as you said, start assist in building schools, for an example. But we must remember, it's not as simple as, say, doing that, because from the private sector, you get the people that says, but I don't have a job. Now you're using cheap labor of prisoners to deliver a job, but I don't have a job. So it's a fine balance. But for instance, what we're also doing, and we already started doing that, is that they can go out and they can cleaning up the streets. They can cut the grass. It's community service. But I must also say that there are also some challenges on that, because say for instance you take 10 offenders, then you have to make an evaluation, but then you, for instance, you will require say 3 or 4 wardens to go with them. So the question is, do we have enough wardens to accompany them? Because they must be under supervision. So that is part of the problem. But what I can say, maybe I should more say, yes, We put focus on that, more community services. And I mean, there was a time, for instance, that on Saturdays, people could go to the prison, they get to know, can I say, offenders with gradings. They go and work in the gardens, and by 12 o'clock they go back, and that sort of things. So we're looking at that as well.
Okay.
So yes, these are good ideas, but unfortunately, we have to take certain steps to enhance that. In 95, 96 about, I participated in Parliament in the budget vote on correctional services. The then minister was Nkondo Balfour. And I said in my speech then, but you must let the prisoners work. And then he looked at me and he said, I'm mad. I saw him after the debate and said, don't think that I'm mad. You must let the people work. So there was a gap where they thought that they don't let prisoners work. But that is now changed. And it is also, unfortunately, everything is a process. It's not a matter of overnight change to do that.
It's going to take time. It's going to take time to implement things. Minister, then there's a thing I think we spoke about earlier on. Terrorists that terrorized the Cape Town, George Cabral. He was transferred from Cape Town to another prison outside of the province. And then not so long ago, he was transferred back. And I think they brought it to your attention that the sentiment of this dude has to go outside of Cape Town because he's a problem. He creates, from within prisons within Cape Town, he creates terror. What happened there? Did he go back? What was the process there?
Well, I can say that, yes, he was a constant,
Okay.
maximum. And then he was transferred to Helderstrom. We were not aware of it because the commissioner set out an order that any of those class of offenders, he must give permission to be transferred from one prison to another. Permission was not obtained.
Yeah.
So we are busy with consequence management there. But what happened, he was transferred, and the next morning when he arrived in Helderstrom, I received a call. And if I have it correct, it is called the Cape Community Crime Committee.
Okay.
One of the members phoned me, and exactly what you said.
Yeah.
George Cabral is known for the fact that he's a vicious person, and that it will have an effect on the community.
Yeah.
We immediately acted on that, and he has been transferred, and he's in Gosimampuro CIMAX at the moment, and he's still there.
Okay. And then there's my following question that people ask me: why is Shaldeer Sheikh still playing golf? Is there anything we can do about that? Because I mean, if you do a crime, you need to pay the time. And if people feel it's unfair that he's still out there, he was found guilty, but he's still playing golf, and he was terminally ill. So according to me, when someone is terminally ill, you are going to die within a few months. So, it's been years now, and he's been, obviously a miracle happened. So is there any talks of him going back into prison?
Now, maybe I should speak about the parole and the system as such. Now, firstly, we have certain categories. For instance, if a person has been sentenced less than 24 months, then the head of the correctional center makes a decision whether the person can go on parole or not. But at least 25% of the time has been served. When it's more than 24 months, then you have the Correctional Supervision and Parole Boards, and they make the decisions, and then it is required that at least half of the sentence must have been served. But then you have people sentenced to life. We call them lifers.
Okay.
Now, lifers, the legislation had been changed that life imprisonment nowadays means life. So people still think that, like in the olden days, if you get a life sentence after 25 years and get out, it's not like that anymore. It's for life.
Okay.
And if you're sentenced for life, you can only come in consideration for parole after 25 years. But the lifers are approved by the minister.
Okay.
So all applications for parole comes on lifers come to me.
Okay.
So that is the background. Now, if you go, for instance, to look at Shabu Shaib, you must remember, well, it was long before my time,
Yes.
but besides that, I think he got, I'm not sure, I think it was an 8 or a 10-year sentence. But that has been lapsed already.
Okay.
So he was out on medical parole. And yes, of course, people have the right to ask the questions.
Yes.
Because he was terminally ill. And that was why a medical parole was approved.
Yes.
Okay, I must also say the minister approved. The minister or the national commissioner can approve medical parole.
Okay.
So, but you can't do anything now
Yeah.
because the 10, say he was sentenced for 10 years has been lapsed.
Okay.
It's the same with the former President Zuma.
Mhm.
He was only for 15 months.
Yeah.
Sentence of 15, that's been expired long ago.
Yes.
So you can't do anything about it.
Okay.
What I can do, and I did it. For instance, let's take the Ellison Botha case. The two offenders went out on bail, they're lifeless. And then what happened is there is a clause in the legislation, in the Correctional Services Act, that says if the minister approved parole, he may or she may, within 24 months, revoke the parole.
Okay.
So what I did is, although it was a previous minister, you must remember when you talk about the minister, it's about the public position of the minister. So I studied it very well. I received certain legal opinions on it, and I was still within the 24 months, and I revoked their parole, so I brought them back. And they're still in prison at the moment. I'm very strict when it comes to parole. I look at what is the risk of reoffending. You get a thick file on each and every application from, can I say, the Risk Analysis Center, from a psychologist, from a social worker, and everything. And then they have to determine the risk of reoffending. Is it a low risk, is it a moderate risk, or is it a high risk? Now, I personally said that if it is low to moderate, I will not approve.
Okay.
Because I have a responsibility to protect the communities. So if the risk is, say, for instance, moderate, and I let them out on parole, then it's now our conscience.
That's right.
Is they really offend? And let me give some statistics, which is disturbing. In the previous financial year, we had just over 200 parolees who reoffended and committed murder. There were just over 300 parolees who reoffended, committed rape again. It's totally unacceptable.
Yes.
So, but we must remember, not all people who have committed a murder, for instance, gets a life sentence. So I have control on that.
Okay.
Let's take the Griquas case, for instance. That specific offender received a 20-year sentence. What I can do, and I did it in a couple of cases, that if the parole board approves parole, then as minister, I do have the authority to ask for a revision.
Okay.
Then I ask for the review parole board to review that. And I did it, for instance, in the case of the Marius van der Westhuizen situation, where the offender shot the Eastern children. The parole board approved, but I asked for a revision, and then it was not approved further. I did it with Noah Peterson, Tariq Peterson, the case. The parole board approved the parole. I requested a revision, and on the revision, the parole was stopped. So we can do that. Now, I know some people criticizes me because I'm too strict.
Yeah.
I will keep on doing this because we cannot just say, yes, we have an overcrowding problem. And sometimes people think, let the people go out on parole.
Yeah.
That's an easy way out. But it is not a responsible way of doing it because then you allow criminals to go back into community and they re-infect. Not all of them.
Yeah.
We must do our utmost best to try and rehabilitate them.
That's right. Minister, you mentioned something very interesting now in the concern on the Cape Flats. We have a lot of pedophiles, sexual offenders. They go in for 10 years. We have cases that has been recorded. They went in for a crime and they go in, especially pedophiles. They go in and they can't be rehabilitated. They come out after 10 years, they commit the same crime. And that is one of our biggest. We had little girls over the last 7 years that I recorded on my platform. The guy went inside, he went for his sentence, he did his sentence, he came out, he killed another girl. He goes in again, 10 years later, he does the same. Is there something we can do about this? I believe pedophiles can't be rehabilitated. They need to stay indoors because our people are fearing. And because they can't really go anywhere else, they have to go back to their homes. We have young men that were sexually assaulted by their uncles, their fathers. And when they come back, they live in the same home. And in many cases, our young people don't get counseling. It's traumatizing for them. Is this something that we can also look at where we keep these guys rather in prison? I know we said it's overcrowded, but I think just for the safety of our communities and our children.
Let me put it very clearly. I do not approve of the mere fact that we are overcrowded, that we just let people go on parole. I do not approve of that. This morning I said in the Portfolio Committee of Correctional Services in Parliament, what I'm looking at, just on that issue, is that we are going to bring back electronic bracelets.
Okay.
We can put on a parolee, so you can monitor them all the way.
Yeah.
And these days, the technology is so good that you can even monitor the moment they have used alcohol or drugs. And then, of course, that's a violation of their parole conditions. You get them back.
Okay.
I think that's going to play a major role.
Definitely.
Coming back to your specific question, most of those offenders, raping babies and all that sort of thing, children, get a life imprisonment. And I had some of those cases on my table. And I didn't explain the whole process just now, but when a life application is on my table, it came from the parole board. It goes to the National Council on Correctional Services. They make recommendations to me as minister. And I had a lot of cases where the parole board and even the NCCS approved and recommended approval of the for parole. But then I rejected. Specifically, what I'm also doing now is to say to the people, I'm bringing in criminologists and I want their reports. I already said, and I made it an order, to say all offenders of rape, if their parole comes on my table, I want a criminologist report as well. Normally, they only have a social worker and a psychologist report. And I had cases where the report from the social worker as well as the psychologist, because you must remember, they make a finding when the person appears in front of them. And some of them are very fine when they appear before these two people. But the criminologists identify these, can I say, symptoms that lures the pedophiles. I had a specific case where the criminologist said this guy is a pedophile. And needless to say, didn't approve the parole. So what I can say to address that more specifically is to bring in, and I'm repeating myself now again, I want criminologist reports, even not only for lifers, but even for the normal parole boards, that must be part of that. We're in a whole process of revising the parole system. I had a parole summit of 2 days last year, September, and the recommendations are there now. And for instance, the composition of the parole boards will change. At the moment, you have 4 people from the community, and then you have a police officer of official, and also one from correctional services. It's 6 members. But now we're going to change it to see that we ensure, because those people coming out of the community, it's not necessarily all qualified to make a decision, but we are going to put in psychologists, social workers. I have my I will see that they are criminologists, law qualified people. So we are going to change the composition of parole boards to ensure that there's a better understanding when you put an offender on parole. Now, parole, as I can say again, it's a balancing act. Because parole is part of rehabilitation. Because it's sometimes good if you have an offender who can go on parole, start getting used to be back in the community. But they must comply to strict parole conditions. Now, I know you get corruption or corrupt officials. The parole officer, for instance, he or she doesn't do their work properly, and they just allow that things can happen. But I putting pressure now on correctional services, community services, to ensure that we keep to those conditions.
Minister, the other thing like we mentioned now about corrupt officials, we're going to get everywhere, anywhere. They're going to be in the corporate world, they're going to be in government, they're going to be in prison, they're always going to be there. But this is my question, what happens to a corrupt official? Because they smuggle in guns, they smuggle in cell phones, and also the other thing is this, with cell phones, these criminals sit in prison and they control the world outside, who gets killed. I mean, some can even call the witnesses. So is there anything like a phone jam, a signal jammer that you are looking at maybe implementing at prisons? Because I think if there's no signal, they won't be able to communicate.
Right. Well, firstly, let me say the contraband you've mentioned. I'm not aware of any firearms that has been smuggled. That's not. There's no such case.
Okay.
Cell phones is a huge problem. The previous financial year, we've confiscated almost 40,000 of them in our prisons. Yes, specific. Polsmer is a big problem, and we are taking certain steps now when it comes to Polsmer. And you're quite correct. Cell phones is a huge problem, and you have mentioned why. Now, if we can get an official who is complicit, there's severe consequence management. The previous financial year, we've terminated the services of about 184 officials.
The one year, in the last year.
And the previous financial year, because of corruption. Now, you must understand that labor laws in South Africa is of such nature, it's not, you cannot have a disciplinary action on allegations. You need proof on certain things. But coming back to the signal jammers, the old technology was not allowed because you have, for instance, if you want to use it, you have to get permission from ICASA. And now, let's take Goodwood Prison, for instance. The old technology was you cannot use it there because the N1 is passing there. And if you use a signal jammer there, and say, for instance, there's a motor accident at the side or on the N1, then no one can communicate. So it was very difficult to get. But with modern technology, you can. And we don't even need the permission of ICASA because it's an operational matter and you can restrict it very easily, only in the vicinity of the prison. So we're busy with that.
Okay.
But unfortunately, it's costing quite a lot of money. It's quite expensive. Can I say? Well, the equipment is quite expensive. So we have already about 6 pilot projects on, and I don't want to reveal the places where we're busy there at the moment, but we're looking at that to see that we can take them out and that they cannot use the cell phones. And I know the problem when it comes to cell phones, it is either an official. Secondly, we must remember the remand detainees. If they have to go to court, the police picks them up in the morning, they take them to court, and there happens quite a lot of things, and they come back. But still, we have the responsibility to have proper scanners and everything. But that's where some of our officials are corrupt. And I must immediately say, for the majority of the employees of correctional services, I'm very proud of them. They're hardworking, honest people. But we have too many bad apples in the basket. And we'll have to take them out. So they know. We are focusing on that now because it's totally unacceptable. So we will see how we can stop that. And sometimes, we have increased our rates, quite a lot of them. Yes, and we will continue increasing the rates so that the message will come through. It's not worth it.
Minister, there's one thing, we're almost running out of time, but we still have a few minutes left. What I want to ask you, one thing that is a problem on the Cape Flats that I think that you can assist to it, and I'm being brave saying this now. We have a thing called the number gang, and our boys look up to these number gangs. And because these number gangs, so many of our children, they do petty crime, they end up in prison, they come out hardcore gangsters. For many of these boys, this is who they want to become. Back in the day, there wasn't so a lot of these gangs, of these number gang members. It was really limited. There was just a few, and that back in the day, prison was also overcrowded. What can we do to clamp down on this? Because I think this is one of the biggest issues. The number gang controls what happens on the outside. And as you see in the papers over the years and recently, many of these gang bosses, they own businesses. They are the ones causing havoc in communities. Is there something, a plan of action where we can clamp down? Because it affects my generation, it affects my people. Because all our young boys want to do, they see this gangster driving the latest farm, having a life because of unemployment. Also, just to add on, the president spoke about recently bringing the army into the Cape Flats. It's good, but it's only going to last for a month or two. It comes down to these boys looking after these gangsters. How can we work from within the prison system, fixing this, and so that it can have a positive effect on the outside world?
But let me first start by saying, this problem cannot be solved by one department only. We also say in correctional services, rehabilitation is also a societal responsibility. So the society, we will have to take hands. Yes, we can do our part. But if you talk about the number gangs and everything like that, it's a problem that must be addressed by the society, of course, in the first place. And as you said, unemployment, as far as I'm concerned, is the major cause of that. Because people don't have a job. They, as you've mentioned, the gangs and the members are becoming icons because they're wealthy and everything. Now, all the years in Parliament, I've been on the Police Portfolio Committee of Police. And we had numerous submissions on the gangs. And when and they will tell you the names and everything of all the gangs and the leaders and everyone. And then I asked them, well, I can't understand it. You know everything about the gangs, but you don't act. And I came to the conclusion that the members of the police, quite a lot of them, are part of the gangs. It's corruption. And the other part of them, they are afraid of the gangs. So what must be done? And that is what I think they're trying to do now, is to say the police alone is not strong enough to deal with the matter.
Yeah.
But they're bringing in the defense force, and that will assist them. Now, personally, I don't think the defense force should be involved in that. Only in exceptional cases where it's really a crisis. And therefore, I justify at this moment, it is a crisis when it comes to the Cape Flats and the gangs. And it's not only the gangs on the Cape Flats, you have gangs in the Eastern Cape and Gauteng and all those places. So I approve of that. And maybe the gangs can get a message. Soldiers are not trained to be peace officers. They are trained to shoot. So I am worried about that because we saw, for instance, with the COVID situation, we had incidents where members were actually killed by soldiers. But let's see, that is one way. But in the end, it goes back to the police actions. They must ensure that there is no corruption. They have the anti-gang units. So they must screen those people properly and see that they can do the job. But that's the real actions you can take. But in the end, the government must ensure that we can start creating jobs for the people of South Africa. Because if you have a job, then you have an income.
That's right.
I don't have to explain the whole process if you have a job. And that's our problem. And what worries me really on this whole matter is, as you said, it's youngsters. And some of them are supposed to be still at school.
That's right.
But they don't go to school. And they are used and misused by the gangs to do certain things. And I have my full sympathy on the communities where these gangs are rife, because everyone's safety is in jeopardy. So that's from my side what I would say. We will play our part from correctional services. You've mentioned the cell phones. We've mentioned George Geweld.
Yes.
We will do those steps. But that alone is not going to solve the problem. So in the end, it's a societal responsibility.
Minister, it was nice talking to you. Anything else you want to mention to us? We are very excited to see what's happening in prison because it affects our communities directly. So is there anything else that you want to just mention that you're busy with that we should know about? And also, if people ever want to communicate with your department, how do they do that?
Well, firstly, let me say that, of course, we have budget constraints. I haven't mentioned it, but our budget was cut with about 11.7 billion rand the last 5 years. That's put a huge pressure on us. At the moment, the whole JCPS, the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster, that is Justice, Police and all those departments, are working together to see how we can improve the criminal justice system. But I say the more effective the police comes, the more people we have to receive in our prisons. So it's that chain that's going through that. But we must go through that. What I want to say to people is, firstly, yes, if you know about corruption, there are lines, support lines and everything, helplines, put it through. And my people know that they have to follow up these matters, but then it must be proper evidence. It's no use to say, I think that Piet Pompies is a gangster and that he's involved with some criminality. You must have real facts because we can't go on allegations. So that is the one thing. Furthermore, we are improving the security on all our prisons, and we have 243 prisons. So we're upgrading that, curbing, for instance, contraband and everything. And we are acting swiftly, specifically when it comes to gang leaders. I've just mentioned.
Yes.
Dorpsgeweld is a good example.
Yeah.
So from that side, the final message, bring up your children in such a way and set an example that you do not commit crime. Stay out of prison. We had the situation of that one prisoner at Goodwood telling on TikTok how wonderful it is in prison, 3 meals and everything. After a week, there was a TikTok again of the same prisoner, and suddenly he realized it was not very nice in prison.
Absolutely.
Yeah, prison is not a hotel. Stay out of it.
Yes. Minister, thank you so much. And I think a lot of people are feeling a bit better that you are running the correctional services from what I've read. And I think that is good. We need a bit of help. We need a bit of, help from the different organizations within the GU. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope to have you back here in the future.
Most welcome, and thank you for the opportunity again. And I want to say to the people, there's always hope. We must just continue doing a good job.
Thank you, Minister, and all the best. Ladies and gentlemen, that was our Minister of Correctional Services, Dr. Groenewald. You guys can follow him. I like their Facebook page is always busy with what they do. So follow the Correctional Services Facebook page. And please do engage, leave a message. Maybe we can follow up on this conversation. Have a blessed evening and see you in the chat show. Cheers.
Oh, Cape Town, where the skies are blue and your dreams come true only in Cape Town. Where the streets come alive with rhythm and rhyme, it's Kuma time, oh, in Cape Town. We have opened the door for you to explore a million things to see. Cape Town, my beautiful Cape Town. Cape Town, my beautiful Cape Town.